I don't really know why I'm writing this now. I've been reading Nosleep for years, and I guess I figured it was about time to write something. The stories on here are so bizarre that I doubt anyone will consider this real, which is fine by me. The less people that think I'm a monster, the better. The first time I remember it happening, I was about 5, maybe 6. Like all kids, I was afraid of the dark. Well, not really the dark. We all know that it's not the dark itself that we fear, but what might be dwelling in that dark. The monsters. I was particularly scared of the space between my window and my closet. At night, I would see a shadow in the corner, big and black, and it looked almost like it would move. It shimmered and flickered, went back and forth from the edges of the closet and the border of the window. It scared me. I would lay awake for hours at night, watching that corner. Whenever the shadow would drift to the floor, like it wanted to get closer, I would scream. Mom or Dad would rush in and flick on the lights. I would be sobbing and pointing, but of course the shadow would never be there. Spending the rest of the night outside of my room was the norm back then. My parents' room, the living room, the floor of the bathroom, it didn't matter where it was, as long as it wasn't my room. I could sleep anywhere in the house, wherever that shadow wasn't. The dark didn't bother me in those places. Just my room. Just that shadow. I don't remember how I ended up falling asleep that night. I think I was in the living room and conked out when my parents were watching some movie. They must have carried me to my room that night, put me in my blankets, and shut the door. I don't know how long I was asleep, but when I woke up, I was awake. I wasn't groggy or tired. I was awake with this shadow hanging over me. I was terrified. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even pee my pants. I saw the shadow and I knew that it could see me. I felt a weight fall on me, felt a cold move through my blankets. And then I felt something else. My fear gave way, and I was no longer frightened of the shadow. I had a different sensation rush through me, a pain in my stomach that made me move, made me push against the cold and the weight on top of me. Hunger. I felt famished, like I hadn't eaten for days, even weeks. The fear that I felt before could not stand against the sudden need that I had running through me. I needed to eat, had to eat. I could not fight against it. I rushed up from my covers, pushed against the cold, and lunged at the shadow. I felt it beneath my fingers, like ice and cotton. I didn't even comprehend how strange this should have seemed. I had grabbed the shadow, the one that had haunted and frightened me. It squirmed in my hands, wriggled and fought against my grip. It slid out briefly, fell on the floor, tried to flow back to the corner between the closet and window. But I grabbed it again, rolling from my bed and pinning the black mass to the wood of my floor. My fingers dug into it, my teeth soon after. I had to eat. I had to. I bit into it over and over again, chewing each mouthful and swallowing. Every time I bit, I could feel it try to escape, try to move from the path of my teeth. It felt like cotton in my mouth, icy and soft and moving and wet. Such an odd texture. After a while, the shadow stopped moving. I didn't stop, though, and I ate and ate till it was gone, the last of the shadow going into my mouth. I chewed, swallowed, and fell back to sleep. I woke up the next day in bed, still under my covers and hugging my stuffed animal goat. A dream. A strange dream. My mom came in, brought me down for breakfast. I told her of the weird dream I had, how I ate the shadow and that it was wiggly and cold. She laughed and asked me if I was too filled up with shadow to eat my breakfast. If anything, I was hungrier than ever. The rest of that day is a blur of events and play, waiting for my dad to get home and tell him about my dream. He laughed like my mom had, telling me that I was a little killer and had to be hungry to eat an entire shadow. When I went to bed that night, the shadow wasn't there. I went to sleep and never had issues going to sleep in my room again. As I got older, I would get these weird hunger pangs every now and then, mostly when I was exposed to things that were scary. Spooky stories, urban legends, horror movies, even when I went on a few haunted hayrides with friends. While they were screaming, I would be holding on to my stomach, fighting back the rumbles in it. My friends would laugh hearing my stomach, and I became the ultimate anti-fear device my friends had. I don't even know how many movies I got dragged to just so they could hear my stomach grumbling loudly at those tense moments, breaking the mood in the theater and getting laughs. I didn't think much of it for a long time. So I got hungry when I was exposed to horror. So what? Several of my friends had quirks too. Hillary would sneeze uncontrollably whenever someone touched her nose. Morgan cringed when she heard people say crusty and would gag. Whatever. This was just mine. It wasn't until I was 17 that I realized that it wasn't just a quirk. Sarah was having her sweet 16. We had been friends since we were in elementary school, so I was the first person invited and helped set up her house with her family. Instead of doing a grand, over-the-top event like several of the girls at our school did, Sarah had decided to have a slumber party with a few close friends. There were 6 of us in total, and it was hysterically fun. We played games we hadn't played since we were little. Swam in the pool, destroyed a piñata, and had a bonfire. When she opened her gifts that evening, one was a Ouija board. There were giggles and oohs as she pulled back the paper. Glow in the dark. Classy. We knew that we would be playing with it that evening. It was a given. Her parents had laughed and told me to make sure we didn't summon a demon in their house. I was the oldest after all, so I had to keep Sarah in line. I laughed. We set up the board in her basement later, but didn't play till it got late. Rachel, who was a wannabe Wiccan, decided to take control of the process and lead our group of giggling teenage girls into talking to the dead. There's not enough space around Sarah's basement coffee table for all of us to put a hand on the planchette, so I decided to sit this one out. I sprawled out on the couch behind them and watched. Rachel got into the mood quickly, eyes closed and concentrating more than anyone else, I'm sure. When the planchette started to move, there were giggles and denials of moving it that accompanied them. Rachel set about asking questions and glaring at someone who refused to stop laughing. Hillary had a notebook and pen nearby, writing down the letters as they were slowly spelled out, while her other hand stayed on the glowing plastic. The first 10 or 15 minutes we were still having a good time, laughing and giving mock shock at the ridiculous jumble of letters we were getting, because it totally makes sense that some guy named All Flats was a hairdresser in the 1990s and died in a fire at Sarah's house. Whatever you say, Magic Board. Sure. After that, things started to get uncomfortable. I don't remember the name of the new contact, or what gender it gave, but I remember the sudden pang of hunger that hit my stomach. It felt almost like I was cramping, sharp and deep. I had to get up from the couch and walk around for a bit to see if I could get it to go away. I went upstairs, walked around, grabbed some snacks that were still set out in the kitchen, tried to get the hunger to go away, but it wouldn't. In defeat, I wandered back downstairs, several bags of chips in my hands so I could munch while they played. I almost dropped the bags when I got back to the basement. There was someone standing next to the Ouija board. I don't know how to describe it adequately. It looked almost like a person, leaning over the coffee table, a finger on the board. It wasn't one of us. It was darker and taller, limbs a little too long, and it seemed to almost be made of shadow. If the other girls could see it, they didn't say anything, but I could see the unease in the room, see it on their faces. They might not be able to see anything, but they could feel the sudden offness. Morgan looked pale. Sarah was fidgeting where she sat. My stomach rumbled. They chuckled at my stomach, announcing my reappearance, breaking whatever spell had fallen on them, even if briefly. The thing leaning over the board did not move. They returned back to their game. I was caught staring at the thing above the board. I couldn't stop. Whenever Rachel asked a question, its arm would move, finger pushing the planchette across the board as they read the letters aloud. The answers it gave were dark. It spelled out death several times to some of their questions, but not always. When Rachel asked who Sarah might marry, it spelled out liar with a smile. My stomach hurt. My teeth hurt. I needed to eat. I needed to ease the pain building in my gut. I couldn't stop my hand as it moved out. I half expected my hand to pass through the form above the board, certain that I was just seeing an illusion. But my hand grasped the thing's other arm. It felt solid beneath my fingers. When it turned its head to look at me, I knew that I should have been afraid. I should have been running. I should be letting it go and screaming. It wasn't human. It wasn't natural. It wasn't safe. But all I felt was hunger. The others didn't notice when I stood up to go behind the couch. Didn't notice the struggle it gave when it fought against my hands as I pulled it with me. They didn't hear the cries it gave when I pushed it to the ground and bit into its ethereal flesh. The screams as I pulled off hunks with my teeth, chewing quickly before sinking in for the next bite. It writhed and fought, but I did not stop. I was so hungry. So hungry. I knew in that instant that the dream I'd had when I was little wasn't a dream. I had eaten that shadow just as I was eating this thing now. It had the same iciness that shadow had, though this one's softness was more like that of cake or sponge rather than cotton. It was wet, and I drank from several of my bites before ripping and chewing, tasting of dark and the redness of copper. The more it flailed, the more my stomach rumbled, louder and louder as I ate, hunger growing the more I ripped from it. I don't know how many times I bit into it before it finally stopped moving altogether. I finished the rest quickly, unable to stop myself until it was finally gone, the pain stopping at the last swallow. I was oddly calm after I finished. And a little sleepy. By the time I climbed back to the front of the couch, the thrill of the Ouija board appeared to be wearing off. Whatever they had been talking to had stopped a few minutes ago, even with their sudden badgering and attempts to rile the board. They wanted to know what the last word it managed to spell meant. Eater. I've been in college for a few years now, but I've had more than a few incidents since then. Felt the hunger well up in my stomach and had the pain develop in my teeth. I've eaten things that I don't understand, seen other things run if they notice me staring. I don't know why I'm like this, why I get this hunger, let alone why I can see and touch what others can't, why I'm compelled to eat them. I know that my hunger isn't just some quirk. It isn't something that I can control. I've been up and down this subreddit and several other horror fiction sites and have yet to find something even vaguely like what I do or am. I know that I should be more paranoid or frightened with this, but for some reason I can't get myself worked up about this. There is some part of me that is disturbed, but the rest of me can't figure why this can't be deemed natural, whatever natural means. I suppose what I'm wondering is, does this make me some kind of monster? That's one of the reasons I'm finally writing this. The other reason is that I'm killing time at the moment. I promised to stay awake for as long as I could, and writing this is helping me not to drift off. A friend of mine that lives off campus has been having night terrors and is feeling uneasy in her new place. It took me a while to get her to tell me about it. She didn't want me to think that she was crazy. She's been feeling like something's watching her, catches glimpses of something moving in the corner of her eye when she's studying or hanging out with people. I offered to spend a few nights at her place this weekend to help calm her down and let her know there won't be anything to be afraid of. I'm good at helping friends through scary situations. She fell asleep a little while ago, but I'm going to try and stay up for a while longer. I'm just so hungry.